Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society. We are grateful to gather on this beautiful morning, both in person and online, for a time of inspiration, reflection, and connection. Whether you join us today with joy in your hearts, weighted with burdens, or searching for meaningful connections, we are glad that you are here. I'm the Reverend Diana Smith, the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a somewhat tall white woman in my mid-40s with short, curly, white and brown hair, purple glasses, a teal shirt and black jacket, and a stole with hands of many colors on it, standing in UUS's pulpit. Our sanctuary is filling with people of all ages. If you're outside the sanctuary, we invite you in. I also understand the appeal of continuing to reconnect. Through the window walls of our sanctuary, we connect to the outdoors as well, where it is a beautiful, clear summer day. As we gather, we give thanks for this land and all who have cared for it over the centuries, particularly the Kickapoo, the Iowa, the Sauk and Meskwaki, and the Oceti-Shakawan nations. As people of many ages, genders, races, sexual orientations, classes, abilities, and health statuses, we know how important it is to come together as a radically welcoming spiritual community. As Unitarian Universalists, our faith expresses our core value of love through how we agree to be together and to support each other. We are guided by the shared principles and sources of our living religious tradition. This morning, we will celebrate and explore how community care is an expression of and helps us live more deeply into interdependence while building a stronger world community that centers love and justice. If you're newer to our congregation, we invite you to learn more about us after the service. For those who are here in person, you can talk to a greeter in the atrium, or today, actually outside. I'll get to that in a minute. And for those of you who are online, there's a link to the visitor form in the YouTube notes that will let us connect with you. And so, as we begin, I share some thoughts from first our outgoing president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who said, "As Unitarian Universalists, we know that salvation is not individual. A theology of interdependence and mutuality reminds us that as we care for ourselves, we must also ensure the health and well-being of the most vulnerable." And then this from Reverend Sophia Betancourt, who is the new president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. We just officially elected her a couple weeks ago. She said, "Communal care is the living promise of faith communities. It encompasses all that we offer to each other and all that might come into being because of our choices to freely associate together over time. Communal care is found in all the small acts that tie communities together, and it is found in seemingly impossible visions we carry for the future, visions that can only be realized across the generations. Communal care calls us to become good ancestors, to provide a foundation of love and justice that will sustain those who are yet to come." And so, let's begin together by joining our voices and singing hymn number 1028, "The Fire of Commitment." Donna Simonton and Alex Heatland, our music director, will lead us. The words will be appearing on the screens. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Good morning. I'm Emily Johnson, a worship associate. I'm a 30-something white woman of average height wearing a green dress today, and my pronouns are she, hers. As Unitarian Universalists, we light a flame within a chalice as a symbol of sanctuary and safety to unite us in our worship and to remind us of our ongoing search for the light of truth. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words as Zoe lights our chalice. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the wonder and mystery of this great gift. So let us now kindle the flame of our liberal religious heritage and renew our covenant of mutual love and care. Love is our doctrine, the quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to serve those in need. This we promise, this we covenant, with life and one another.
Each week, we light a candle for justice and healing, to acknowledge our interdependence with the natural world and with all members of our global community, especially the most vulnerable. We light this candle so that we may not be numbed to injustice and trauma, but rather find strength, courage, and love as we work in solidarity with others for liberation, justice, and healing. Together, we create resilience and hope. Today, as we light this candle, we're particularly mindful of both recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions that further legalize more discrimination against queer people and that further do away with programs designed to help reverse discrimination against people of color. We're also mindful of the fact that the Iowa State Legislature will be convening on Tuesday, this coming week, to attempt to further limit the right to an abortion in Iowa. As Unitarian Universalists, we unabashedly declare that every body is sacred. That includes bodies of queer people, people of color, trans children and youth, disabled people, and yes, people with uteruses who need reproductive justice. We also declare that bodily autonomy, that is, the right to make choices about what happens to our own bodies, as well as the resources and support to follow through on these choices, is a basic human right. Bodily autonomy and supporting each other in our bodily autonomy is liberatory. Supporting bodily autonomy is part of what we mean when we say that we center love in this church, in this congregation, in this faith. When we work in solidarity with each other for liberation, justice, and healing. As Unitarian Universalists, we are also very clear that the right to safe, legal abortion is part of a robust approach to reproductive justice. When Black women founded the reproductive justice movement in the 1990s, they argued that for many people, particularly Black women, the frame of choice was irrelevant, since the choice to get an abortion was often never possible regardless of legal status because they could not access abortion care. Instead, they argued, reproductive justice is the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. This is what we all want. These rights and choices have not been available to many people in this country, and restricting abortion is moving in the wrong direction. As Reverend Ashley Horan, who leads Side with Love, our Unitarian Universalist Justice campaign, says, the reproductive justice movement teaches us that stigmatizing abortion, alongside all the societal factors that make every choice in an unwanted pregnancy a difficult one, from a broken healthcare system to religious intolerance, to lack of support for parents, to poverty, to mass incarceration, are actually what is traumatizing to people who do not want to be pregnant. The majority of people who experience sorrow, grief, despair, and isolation after an abortion are mourning not abortion itself, but the circumstances in which that became the right or only decision for them. Violence, abuse, trauma, poverty, instability, racism, ableism, these are the real causes of despair. And so, as Reverend Horan says, we absolutely believe that abortion is a blessing because it is one of many, many, many pathways towards honoring the sacredness of our bodies and helping us create lives of freedom and thriving. We are all endowed with the twin gifts of agency and conscience. Blessings are not always joyful, but they always support human thriving and freedom. As Reverend Katie Zay, the CEO of the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, puts it, what I've learned in talking to people is that abortion can be a blessing. Abortion can save lives. Abortion can affirm life. Abortion can be a positive parenting decision. Any time that disparities in resources and freedoms or legal rights make it more difficult for some groups to exercise autonomy over their bodies, our faith calls us to take actions. So what do we do? Well, first, the Iowa State Legislature is meeting on Tuesday, and it is imperative that we make our voices heard as they meet. Sharing how abortion is a blessing is part of a robust approach to reproductive justice and is part of our bodily autonomy. If it helps, share my words today with your friends and your family, but definitely contact legislators from around the state. There's also a link that's being dropped in the YouTube notes. It didn't make it into the actual order of service, but it is for some ways that you can get involved in making your voice heard. Second, you can be part of the movement supporting reproductive care access. Some of this work is happening through organizations that UUS supports, like the Emma Goldman Clinic, the Free Medical Clinic, and the Black Maternal Health Collective, as well as through expanding our Whole Lives offerings. The Minister's Discretionary Fund will likely also become a more important resource for supporting this congregation's members and friends seeking bodily autonomy. We invite you to further support all of these groups in this work. In addition, if providing abortions after 6 weeks becomes illegal in Iowa, in addition to political organizing, there will likely be networks helping people access abortions in places where it is legal. This will be building on work that is already being done, helping trans children and youth access gender-affirming care. The group that I have been working with, which is leading developing the Iowa faith community's response to the potential ban on abortion after 6 weeks, is the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. We invite you to get connected with the Interfaith Alliance, as well as with the Iowa Unitarian Universalists Witness and Action Network. You can sign up to receive information from these through their websites or social media. Third, you can read up on the reasons for reproductive justice and more actions in the Side with Love Congregational Reproductive Justice Action Guide on the Side with Love website. Yes, this already exists. The link will be in the show notes and in the weekly email, and we may even be able to get it out sooner. And finally, we can invest in community care and the practices that grow joy and delight, which I'll get to a little bit later in this service. Because we need positive things to sustain us. This is hard work, y'all. It is one thing after another, and we need each other, and we need joy, and we need delight, and we need to live, and we need to love. So let's do that. So as I move to light our candle of justice and healing, I invite you into the knowledge that affirming the right to safe, legal abortions is about affirming bodily autonomy, as well as how our liberation is bound up together. The actions that the legislature is likely to take this week are part of a slew of actions that seek to criminalize bodily autonomy in this state, that limit human flourishing, that restrict the thriving of individuals and our community. And so, as I light this candle, let's hold a time of silence to listen to our hearts and our bodies, or perhaps to lift up prayers. Okay. Well, now I have a story. I got to tell the story this week. And it is about one of my favorite things, making soup. Who here likes soup? Okay, good. Maybe not so much the kids, but maybe someday you'll like soup. I like soup. Maybe not so much. You like... Good for you. I am glad that I have some other friends here who like soup. Well, this is about a kind of soup called callaloo. Now, callaloo is a thick green soup that is served in the Caribbean, and it is eaten in places like Jamaica and Trinidad, where people say that learning to make callaloo is like learning to live. Now, callaloo was developed when people from Europe and Asia and Africa and South America came to Trinidad, where the people who were called the Caribs and the Arawaks were already living. Each of these different people, they arrived with their own language and their own songs and their own food and their own clothing, and they were all different from each other and from the people who had lived on Trinidad forever. Now, sometimes when people who are different from each other start living together, they don't always actually live together. They end up living in their groups separate from each other. And that's what happened on Trinidad. Until one day, there was a big storm that came through. Now, in the Caribbean, there are these big storms called hurricanes. Has anybody ever heard of a hurricane? Okay, good. So hurricanes are these giant storms. They pick up all of this water as they circulate over the oceans, and then when they hit islands, there are big winds and lots of rain, and it is really scary. And that happened. There was a huge storm. It tore up lots of houses. Everything was destroyed. And afterwards, people walked around, they found that there were downed trees, a lot of people didn't have houses. And the people who were survived, how do you think they might have been feeling?
Sad.
Definitely sad.
Mad.
Yes, definitely mad. How about scared?
Oh, yeah, scared.
Yeah, I would be scared. I know I've been scared after there are big storms. When there are big storms, even around here, just big thunderstorms, my dog goes upstairs and hides in the closet. But of course, the closets didn't exist because they'd been torn apart by the hurricane. So suddenly all of these people, they don't have homes, and they are mad, and they're sad, and they're scared. And there weren't a lot of things. And you know how it can be sometimes when there are shortages? Sometimes it brings out the mean in us. And that's what happened. People started to get greedy, and they took what they had and they hoarded it, and they only shared it with the people who were in their own groups, who were in their own cultural groups. A dark cloud seemed to descend over Trinidad, not just from the lingering hurricane, but because it was not a fun place to be. And then, amidst all of this, an elderly woman was walking around and she saw something shiny in the rubble. Well, when you see something shiny in the rubble, you can't just leave it, right? What do? You dig it out. Well, that's what she did. She moved aside the boards, and she pushed and she pulled, and finally she came across a giant cooking pot. I'm talking a giant cooking pot. I don't know why somebody made a cooking pot this big, but they had. It must have been for a big restaurant or something. So she finds this pot, and she starts thinking, and she gets an idea. She poured water and salt into the pot and placed it on a fire. And she started to stir it, and she said, "It may be a little bit bland, but the soup that I am cooking is for all of the people in this land." Can you join me? It may be a little bland, but the soup that I'm cooking is for all the people in this land. Well, people were walking by and they heard her saying this. It may be a little bland, but the soup that I'm cooking is for all the people in this land. Well, folks got to thinking, there's soup here, but I don't like bland soup. So what can I do about this situation? Well, one of the families, there was a Carib family, went home and they got out some cocoa plums and cocoa yams that they'd hidden, and they brought them to the pot and they cut them up and they put them in there. And then an Arawak family found some peppers and some squashes that they'd hidden, and they brought those and they put those in the pot. And she stirred that pot, saying, "It may be a little bland, but the soup that I'm cooking is for all the people in this land." And so then a family from Mali brought some okra that they'd hidden, and the Spaniards and the French, they brought garlic and onions and thyme. This is starting to sound good. I just ate breakfast, but I'm getting hungry. Goodness gracious. The Syrians brought some cumin. The Indians, some Indian folks had found some coconuts that had fallen from the trees, and they brought those, and they poured the coconut water and the coconut shavings into the soup. And some British folks brought some salt pork. A Chinese family brought some dasheen that they had saved from their garden. And with each addition, the woman stirred the pot and she said, "Help me out. It may be a little bland, but this soup that I'm cooking is for all the people in this land." Well, it was starting to smell good, right? And then there was a raucous noise, and a large flock of children was coming down the beach. They were of all different nationalities, of different colors and shapes and sizes. They'd been helping each other, that they had been so much that they had been too busy to pay attention to all of their differences, and so they came, and what they had is they had gathered a giant bucket, lots of different buckets of blue crabs, which they put into the soup. And the woman stirred those crabs in and said, "Help me out. It may be a little bland, but the soup I'm cooking is for all the people in this land." Although it wasn't smelling so bland anymore because we had all of these things that had suddenly been added. And so when it boiled together, she served it to everyone, and it was delicious and tasty. Then, with all of their bellies filled, the people began to talk and tell stories, and those black clouds over Trinidad, they cleared away and the sun shone again. The divisions on Trinidad were breaking down. And so the children who had helped make that soup are called Callaloo children, because they know how to get along with other people. And that is one of the ways that we can create community care. And so with that, we are going to head out to religious education. But before we do, I'm going to come back over here because I want to make sure I say this correctly. I want to make sure that you know that towards the end of today's worship service, we'll be practicing a fire drill. Now, I know a lot of you, especially the little ones, the kids here, practice fire drills regularly at school, but we're going to be practicing one here at UUS today. When the alarm is pulled, the children and youth are going to stay with your teachers, okay? So you're going to stay with the religious education teachers, and all of the adults who are in here are going to evacuate to the west side of the parking lot near the solar panels. Children and youth, you are going to stay with your teachers around the little free library and food pantry, and your families will come and get you there, okay? Parents, families, you should check in with the teachers and make sure that they know that you are taking your child and have checked you off before you take your child, okay? And then we are going to get to have popsicles and tangerines and granola bars over near the solar panels. So with that, let's sing our kids out to religious education.
As we enter into our time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer, we acknowledge the joys and sorrows of our congregation. We do this by dropping stones into a bowl of water, symbolically immersing our personal joys and sorrows into the flow of all life's joys and sorrows. The water surrounds and holds the stone, just as we are surrounded and held by the love and support of this congregation. If you're participating in our service elsewhere, you may wish to meditatively hold a stone, wash your hands, or meditate on an object near you. And now, if you're in the sanctuary, please come forward, take a stone from the basket, and place your stone in the water as we sing.
invite you into a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. Spirit of life and love, we are here today holding so much, with gratitude that we can gather in person, that we can join in this time together online, that we can hold the richness of our lives, our joys and our sorrows, and come together around them to find new sustenance. Spirit of love, in the coming days, help us find new strength in these trying times. Help us to listen more deeply and share our hearts more openly. Help us find the courage we need and the vulnerability that comes with it. In these times that we share, may we find new generosity and gratitude and love to sustain us. Amen. Blessed be.
Today's reading is It Starts with a Spark by Linda Susan Ulrich. A quick flash that makes you doubt your senses, but then a tiny ember glows on the braided twine and brings a flame to life. A blurry array of pinpoint lights moves out toward the viewer. Soon you find a candle sitting on a table, desolate until its wick touches yours. And suddenly the brightness doubles. In an instant, the warmth has grown. This intensified glow draws others like a beacon, 5, 10, 50, hundreds maybe. Not moths bent on self-destruction, but fellow travelers seeking the road ahead. The people begin to move forward. No matter how far the line stretches, no one is left to fend for themselves. Everyone makes progress, or no one does. In the distance, bands of other beacons now beckon, proof of other sparks that became blazes. The air crackles with anticipation as everyone approaches the center. There, the scales are balanced. There, the broken are healed. Now you know what it means to be love. Now you know how to illuminate the sky.
In my former career, in environmental planning and community development, I worked with many kinds of communities. Usually something big was happening in or to those communities that was forcing them to make some big changes and figure out what to do and how to change. I found it fascinating how different communities responded to these challenges. In some of them, I witnessed more resistance to change than in others. There were many reasons for this, often related to how ready the community was to be creative, but also sometimes related to how comfortable people had been with the status quo, and often related to how good members of the community were at communicating with each other and with building networks. I witnessed some communities that were more invested in caring for each other, in creating strong networks of care. They seemed to understand more deeply that we're all interdependent and need to care for each other, especially noticing the needs of the people who were most vulnerable in any given situation and listening to the voices, to those voices to help shape change, rather than simply listening to the people who were in the majority or who were the best connected. Now, this made sense to me. Growing up poor in a multicultural community in Dallas, Texas, I'd noticed how people cared for each other, how information was shared, how if one family didn't have enough one month, another family helped. Sometimes it was electricity that was shared, sometimes heat or space, sometimes it was food, whether extra supplies or often communal meals. I'd also noticed how, as I went to a more economically mixed high school, then college, and then began moving into increasingly in middle class and more affluent circles, those networks, those bonds that created supportive networks and communities, often got weaker as people became more independent and self or immediate family reliant. While this greater access to resources and independent thinking seemingly made communities more resilient and able to adapt to change, what I noticed in community development and environmental planning was that this wasn't completely true. Now, it may make individuals or some families more likely to be able to make it through a crisis with more resources, but that often happens at a cost. The broader community is more likely to be decimated, to fall apart. And as we know, we need one another. We need community. What's more, often those who are most vulnerable suffer more when this happens. But the opposite is also true. The communities that focus on creating robust, caring networks, that work with each other, that listen to many voices, especially prioritizing ones who are most marginalized or vulnerable, and work together to develop solutions that center justice, communities that create many different solutions and networks, often overlapping each other, those communities are often even more resilient, vibrant, and joyful. They are places of delight. We often hear similar stories from the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which works around Earth with communities in crisis. The UUSC works from a place of recognizing inherent individual and community worthiness, dignity, and power. In an article about some of this work, entitled Beyond Borders, Community Care as the Deepest Act of Global Solidarity, the link is being dropped in your chat, UUS's senior program leader for the Rights at Risk program, Rachel Gore-Reed, tells us how networks of locally led civil society organizations create nimble mutual aid systems and provide the most radical forms of care and political solidarity woven into these acts of resistance. Political borders are often areas where that's Rachel, have seen vibrant community building and the coordination of collective needs by volunteers in place of systems or structures that do not serve or uphold human dignity. These vibrant communities, this coordination of collective needs, is something that we can cultivate right here, right now. It doesn't just enable us to be more responsive to and resilient in crises, which goodness knows we're facing more of and will continue to face due to climate change alone, not to mention other societal and political changes. Community care also creates more vibrancy and joy. It does this because it builds on something that we love, relationships, and does so in a way that recognizes our differences, interdependence, and individual and collective agency or power. So we can create multiple communities within our larger congregation and our even broader community. We can reach out and reach in. We can build creatively from our values of interdependence, equity, justice, transformation, pluralism, and generosity. We can support, rest, play. We can play art and we can support rest, play, art, and communal gatherings. As Rachel Gore-Reed says, we can tend to our own communities, keep our focus on global systemic inequities, and weave together our narratives, speaking truth to power that comes with recreating the world through the lens of equity and self-determination. So may it be. Amen. Blessed be.
How we give, what we do with our lives, our time, and our resources is a reflection of our values. In response to the abundance we are blessed with, every week this congregation donates generously to communicate to organizations in the community whose work aligns with our values and principles. Our community partner agency this month is Inside Out Reentry Community. Based in Iowa City, Inside Out serves people returning to Johnson County and elsewhere after incarceration. Starting before release and continuing, they provide help with reentry plans, including finding work and a place to live, connecting to community resources, and ongoing mentoring and peer support groups. In the sanctuary, the ushers will collect the offering, or you can follow the instructions on the screen for how to give online. All cash contributions go directly to our community partner agency. In addition to assisting our community partner, you may contribute towards your pledge to our society or contribute to the congregation to provide additional support for our operating expenses. You may also contribute by check using the memo line to designate the purpose. The offering is a sign of commitment to this free congregation, which is almost completely supported by the generosity of all who join with us. As we give and receive the offering, may we be transformed by our giving, and may the world be transformed by our gifts.
This morning, a nurse's dedication prayer seemed appropriate as we talked about communities of caring. Some of you know that I've been a nurse for more than 50 plus years. But back in 1969 when I graduated, this song was sung at my graduation and many graduations after that. What did we look like as nursing students? We all looked pretty uniform, except that every school of nursing had its own cap. Ours was a bit of three-shaped on the top. It was supposed to represent the Trinity, but we were not angels. And our uniforms were all the same. And I brought my little friend here that kind of looked like nurses training back in 1969. So, a nurse's dedication prayer. Giver of life, grant me strength that I may work, intelligence to ply my art, zeal to guard those lives committed to my care. Keep clean my lips from harmful speech, and keep my eyes the others good to see. Gentle my hands, kindly my heart, patient my soul, that by thy grace pain may be eased. Sick bodies healed, bent minds made straight, lifespan increased. By ignorance or sloth may I harm none. To those bowed down by grief I hurt. My ache, my fear, grant surcease, and consecrate me to my task, and consecrate me to my task.
So, we are now coming to the time of our service we've all been waiting for. One of the pieces of community care is about how we care for each other in disasters. We've heard a little bit about that today, all sorts of disasters, both natural and human-made. One of the things that, Christine, do we have that slide of the evacuation routes? Did it make it in? Okay. One of the things before the alarm goes off that I want to tell you is, who here knows where our tornado shelters are? I am not going to make you go to our tornado shelters today, but because you all will all not like me if I do, because our tornado shelters are our bathrooms over there, okay? They're also this kind of big central room and the central office room. So if there's a tornado, that's where we get to go. We're not going to do that today, okay? What we are going to do is we're going to have a fire drill. I have never heard this before, and so I'm not sure what our alarms are going to sound like. I'm going to keep talking until we think that they go off. There are doors, so if you're at the front of the sanctuary and the fire alarm goes off, you come up here and you head out the religious education wing. Okay, if you're in the back, head out those two doors that way.